thank you all in advance for being beta testers. You don't know it yet, but this is the first time this set of slides I've put together on the minimum viable product. I've been looking for a venue to create the minimum viable product about the minimum viable product, which is what this is. And so I want to just encourage you, especially with such an informal setting, to really interrupt with questions and let's have a discussion about this concept so that I welcome your feedback, get a sense for what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what's necessary and not. And as usual with these talks, there's really only one ground rule, which is that please cell phones out. Please do Twitter while we're talking. All I ask is use the lean startup hashtag. This is really important because I get feedback from you. If you want to give feedback, that's great. But also, even if there's a notable concept, they say, hey, that makes sense, interested in tweeting about that. It gives me a sense for what did people understand while I was talking, and like, was it just entertainment, or was there actually some content? Of course, what I strive for is some actual content. So I'm Eric. I want to really thank Slideshare and Rich and Kissmetrics for putting this event together. I'm really excited. There was a time when I was going around Silicon Valley and talking about ideas that would become the lean startup, and all I got was funny looks. And I still get a lot of funny looks, but now apparently there's at least a room full of people who think there's something to it. So this is really, let me just say it's a really pleasant change from how it used to be. So I assume everyone knows the blog, Startup Lessons Learned. I'm Eric Ries on Twitter, and we'll really welcome your comments and thoughts. So I always like to start with something really basic. So I thought this time we'd ask a question: why do we build products? Because most of us come from a product development background. We kind of take it for granted that that's what we do, is we build products. And as Steve Blank, who I know a number of you are aware of his work, likes to say, when people get confused, they tend to look at their business card and do whatever it says. And startups generate a lot of confusion, and therefore a lot of looking at the business card. And I know when my business card said VP of Engineering or CTO, when I got confused, I said, well, I better build some technology today, because that's what I do. But I think, of course, to actually have any success in a startup, we have to build products that delight customers, that hopefully attract many customers to us. Occasionally we try to make a lot of money, and as opposed to kind of the quick and dirty product that are just built to flip, the lean startup is all about creating companies with a big vision, where we actually want to change the world and do something significant. Because building cheap, quick, dirty apps is actually really easy. And if that's all you aspire to, you don't need any of this methodology that we've been talking about together. So I'm going to take it for granted that everyone who's interested in the minimum viable product is interested in changing the world. That certainly was my interest as an entrepreneur. And what I thought I'd do is just take a couple slides and locate the idea of the minimum viable product in the greater methodology of the lean startup, and show kind of how it relates to the other concepts that I and a number of other people have been writing about, and then hopefully we can have some discussion. So, make sense? So if you want to do these things, there's kind of two possible approaches. In my career, I've always been torn between these two approaches. The first is what I call maximizing chance of success. If you have a big vision and you want to build a great product and change the world, then the way to increase the odds that that's going to happen is to build a product with as many features as you possibly can. Because each new feature that you add, the theory goes, will maybe there'll be that one extra customer who wouldn't use your product without that feature, but that one extra feature makes them want to use it. And so the more features you have, the more likely you are to be successful. And if you think about it, if you kind of only get one swing with your startup, this is a very rational strategy to say, let's build the product right. And a lot of people who come from an engineering or architecture or design background, this is the way we approach products. And of course, the problem with that is that by increasing the batch size of our work to one gigantic, huge batch, we have a kind of an all or nothing outcome. And even worse, we delay feedback until generally it's too late to do anything about it. And so some people respond against that to take a different approach, which is release early, release often. And a lot of people in the open source world, this is the kind of the mantra, and I've certainly been there myself. The idea here is, okay, if doing everything and all the features is kind of the wrong approach, let's try the exact opposite of that. Let's ship as quickly as possible, and let's get as much feedback as we possibly can. So we'll kind of put something out there, who cares if it actually makes any sense? We'll just listen to what people say, and then we'll kind of keep responding to that feedback and iterate as quickly as possible. And there's a lot of confusion out there because the lean startup, we talk about having a big vision. And so some people think, oh, they're talking about maximized chance of success, because of course we do want to increase the odds of success. That's true. But we also talk about continuous deployment and rapid releases and things that maybe will say, oh, they're just doing release early, release often. And what I wanted to kind of set up for you guys is this idea that the minimum viable product is neither of these. Or maybe another way of looking at it is it's a hybrid of both. The idea here is that we want to take the minimum set of features that is necessary to get the early customers for a product, to give us validation that our long-term vision actually makes sense. So with release early, release often, you can often iterate in a circle, right? Because you keep getting feedback that kind of you ask 3 people for their opinion, you get 5 opinions. And so you don't really know whether you're making progress. It can get very distracting, very disorienting. A lot of startups have been in that situation. So we want to get feedback, but we don't want to get as much feedback as possible. That's actually not our goal. Our goal is to get only the feedback necessary to figure out, are we on the right track or not? And what's challenging about the minimum viable product is that it's often a lot more minimum than you think. So it's easy to convince yourself that in order to get feedback on a product, we have to build a whole bunch of features that customers say are necessary. But I know some of you have heard me talk about InView. We built a downloadable piece of software, and we spent a lot of time figuring out what features the download had to have or not have, and how much quality it should have, and all that kind of stuff. But we forgot the fact that in order to get people to use that product, we first had to convince them to download the product. And when we finally shipped the product, nobody downloaded. So we didn't actually learn anything about what customers wanted for any of the work that we had done beyond just the page that got people that said, hey, you should download this product. After that, nobody made it past. So we actually got all the learning from that 3% of work that we did right at the end to throw up a crappy landing page. That was actually the minimum viable product. We spent 6 months building a 3D avatar rendering system that actually did not contribute to our learning about what customers would or wouldn't want. So this is the basics of the minimum viable product. You got to believe that in the early days of a product, early days of a startup, only visionary customers, what Steve Blank calls early evangelists, are even going to give you the time of day. Those are the only people who you're going to get any feedback from anyway. So let's just accept that that's true. Then minimum refers to what is the minimum amount of work we have to do to engage with those customers to start getting their feedback. They have the ability, because they're just as visionary as you are, to fill in the gaps about what's missing. So the performance might be bad, the product might be buggy, there might be all kinds of things missing. But on the basis just of the vision of what you're selling, they can make sense of it. And since they're just as visionary as you are, they are just as visionary as you are, but they also feel the pain that you're trying to solve acutely. That is, they live with it every day. So they're actually much more likely than you are to really understand whether the product works or not. And of course, we're not asking them what they think they want, because of course a lot of customers don't know what they want. What we're doing is showing them a concrete example of the product, a prototype, an early version, a landing page, sometimes just a paper prototype, that gives them the chance to react against that product. And of course, even better, if we can try to charge them money for that product, then we can get a real signal for, hey, are we on the right track? Is there a problem that we're really solving here? And the idea here, we'll be able to achieve a big vision, but in small increments. So I don't want anyone to go away from this evening thinking, boy, when I put this product out there and I get negative feedback, that's it. I either have to do what customers say or abandon my vision. There are a lot of instances where you have to kind of keep doing the minimum viable product over and over and over again before you finally get that positive signal, doing what we call in lean startups pivots, where we change just one element of the vision each time. And that persistence is key to being an entrepreneur. So don't anyone get me wrong that that's not part of the disciplined way we want to build products with the MVP. We just want to, before it's too late, and of course as soon as possible, find out are we completely crazy or are we on the right track? And so it requires a commitment to iteration. You can't just feel like we're going to throw it out there and hope for the best, and if it doesn't go exactly right, give up. That's not entrepreneurship. I've shown this diagram a million times, and I saw that Heaton actually has some posters for people to take home if they'd like of the lean startup fundamental feedback loop. I just want to make sure everyone has seen this diagram, because the MVP is one of the few tactics out there that operates at all 3 stages of this feedback loop simultaneously. Our goal in any startup practice should be to minimize our total time through the loop, right? We have a set of ideas, we translate those ideas into code or whatever our form of product is, we see what happens when customers react to that, and then we learn something for the next set of ideas. Most practices operate at one stage of this feedback loop, and it actually can be really challenging. Like when we talk about ways to improve the efficiency of product development, we have to be really careful. We don't want to improve the efficiency of customer development, product development, but at the expense of learning. And we don't want to add analytics if that's going to impede our ability to learn or to build. But minimum viable product is one of those things that allows us to get through the whole loop quickly. And in fact, one way to think about it, if you have no product in the market today, and you're asking yourself, well, what is the minimum viable product? is to think, what is the absolute minimum I have to do to complete exactly one turn through this feedback loop? And since we're entrepreneurs, we really have to work hard to minimize the amount of features we absolutely think that we need. So I just want to talk through some quick examples. I already mentioned that we built InView in 6 months, and we actually, at the time, thought we were building a minimum viable product, because the previous company, we had spent 5 years building the first version, right? 5 years of stealth R&D, cost something like $40 million to build. And then we had put it out in front of customers and discovered we made all kinds of tragic mistakes. And it was way too late to do anything with it. So we thought, when we first sat down to do the minimum viable product for InView, I think we spec'd out a bunch of features that we thought would take 2 years. We were really proud of ourselves. And we had a series of meetings where we said, well, okay, we're very proud, but what would it take to cut the amount of time to do this product in half? So what would it look like if we did it with 12 months? And we made these incredibly painful feature cuts. Like, all right, maybe we can live without, in this case it's an avatar-based product. So avatar is like having physics and walking around the room, feature that InView actually never wound up building. And then we would cut some other feature. Well, maybe we can get, just barely we could live without, sound effects when you take an action. We did that. We got it down to 12 months, and then we did it again to get it down to 6 months. And that was as far as we could go. Even though, in retrospect, if we kept going, we might have realized, wait a minute, all we need is a landing page and a download button, and we already would have failed. So another way to think about it is, how can you fail as quickly as possible? So if it turns out that your product is no good, can we just find out as quickly as possible that there's no customers out there whatsoever? And we learned our lesson a little bit. This is 2004, remember, when InView was new. It was election season. This is Kerry v. Bush. And we had this brainstorm, like entrepreneurs do. One day, I don't know who it was, wakes up in the morning and says, a genius way for us to get a huge amount of exposure and insert InView into the mainstream discourse of our society. We will create, and wait for it, it's a great product idea, a series of Kerry and Bush avatars. So you could have your very own presidential debate online with your friends. Which I'm never sure whether I'm going to get a big laugh from that product idea, because I can't even tell you just how awesome it seemed in the moment. Someone ran into the office that morning and said, we are going to build this thing. And we were like, we just had these visions of like Salon.com was going to say, wow, really witty take on presidency. And then we were going to have like all kinds of political reporters be like, new Silicon Valley startup affecting the course of the election, and all kinds of other nonsense. And we were imagining people having these personal versions of the presidential debate, and then posting the video of it online and kind of, becoming like the YouTube sensation, all that stuff. So we really thought that's really cool. And we said, all right, it'll only take us about 2 weeks to build the avatars necessary and do all the plumbing together so that you could have your own debate. We thought that was really minimum viable product. So we spent, this is a company that had been around, I think we've been in existence something like 6 months. We were 5 people, we had no money. And we spent 2 weeks of our lives building out that product that I just described. And you already know where this is headed. We put it out there, and we sent it to our existing customers, few that we had, and we bought AdWords, and we took all this advertising, and thank God we didn't put out a press release. But we did do a fair amount of marketing. And our conversion rate of people purchasing that product, we had priced it, I think, at $1.99, so it would be really affordable, so we didn't want price to be a barrier. We got exactly 0 conversions. I mean, we're not talking about 0.5%, 0.1%, we're talking about exactly 0. We couldn't sell this product to anybody, because actually it's a really bad idea. There's nobody on earth who thinks this is cool. But we hadn't bothered to check that. We were convinced we were right, and so we were willing to invest in 2 weeks. And so we said, well, it's probably the price that's the issue. So we started giving it away for free. We could not pay people to take this product and use it. It was just a thoroughly horrendous idea. And again, if you ask yourself, all right, it turned out to be a bad idea. How could we have found out if it was a bad idea before we invested the 2 weeks in building it? The answer, again, is really easy. We could have put up a landing page offering to sell people this product, and we could have bought the same AdWords we were going to do anyway, and driven people there, and we could have measured the click-through rate on the button that said, I want to buy this thing. We wouldn't have done that test at the time because we were so worried about, well, what will we say on the second page? We'll have to admit to people that we lied to them about having this thing, or we have to have some kind of error message or some sign up for mailing list. Like, we got hung up on the second step, which, as it turned out, there was really no reason for us to do that. Nobody made it to step 2. They all died at step 1. And so that's basically the idea that I want you to take away from the minimum viable product is, look, I don't mind product development and startups when we build products that only a few people like. Right? Occasionally you'll have that experience, right? You build a product, you ship it, and it's not as much of a success as you would like to have. That doesn't bother me that much. What really kills me are the products that nobody wants. I mean, think about it. We invest time and energy, and less people than the number of people required to build the product ever buy it. Those are results we can check out ahead of time. I don't care how visionary and totally off the map and out of the box our idea is. we can check it out with at least a few customers ahead of time to be like, you know what? I mean, are we even remotely on the right planet with this product? That's basically what the MVP is about. And I just thought I'd share two positive examples of the minimum viable product actually working. I don't know how many of you saw, we started doing a series of workshops with O'Reilly around the Lean Startup concept. The way that started was I was giving a talk at the Web 2.0 Expo in San Francisco. I think it was April 1st. Remember, because it was April Fool's Day, a lot of people didn't believe that there was really going to be a talk on the Lean Startup. But I really was going to, and I was like, all right, I need to have something to sell to this audience, because there was going to be a lot of people coming to see this thing, and they always say when you're doing public speaking, you should always be selling something. I didn't have anything to sell. It was really, there were no Lean Startup products. So I told people there was going to be a workshop for the Lean Startup on a certain day. That it was nothing more than my just making that declaration in public. And then I thought, well, I'll create a survey. You went on SurveyMonkey. It cost me $19.95. Great product, by the way. Those who haven't tried it. I created a survey to ask people, what would you like to see in a Lean Startup survey? So that I would have a page that I could link to from the talk. I mean, this was my thought process, exactly how it worked. I was like, I got to have a URL to tell people who want the workshop, go somewhere, I'll send them to this survey. And then at the end of the survey, I thought, well, maybe there's some people who, and the survey had a lot of questions about how much would you be willing to pay for a workshop and what should it be and all that stuff. And I thought, on the last page of the survey, SurveyMonkey requires you to give them a URL where it's going to send customers next. I was trying to figure out where do I want to send people. That all right, I'll create a PayPal link that allows people to pay money for the workshop, and I'll send them there when they're done with the survey. So the last page of the survey said something like, there's going to be this survey on a certain date. Here are the topics. And I remember writing this. This is like 6 hours before I'm supposed to speak. I'm like sitting there. I don't know, what should the topics be? I wrote a bunch of topics that they would be at the workshop. I did my best job to say what I thought it would be. And I chose a price to charge for it that was way more than I thought anyone would ever be willing to pay to come, spend time with me about the Lean Startup. Because I really didn't have an inkling yet of what this whole thing was going to turn out to be. And I put it up there. And I got to tell you, although I advocate minimum viable product all the time, it's a big part of my shtick, it's easy to tell other people to do it. It's actually really hard to do yourself. I mean, right? Because it's easy when I'm working with companies as a consultant. It's not my baby. It's not my vision. So of course I'm going to be like, these features aren't needed. Cut. Like, get it down to the minimum viable. So this was a good example of me having to, I was like, I got to eat my own dog food or people on my blog are going to comment and call me a hypocrite. That was really what I was thinking to myself. I really tried to visualize the pain of not doing it. Because I was really embarrassed. I was like, God, people are going to say, what, you crazy person charging money for a workshop? Who are you to give a workshop? I mean, you won't believe all the objections I imagine people might have to my doing this activity. And of course, I had been talking to publishers and media companies and people about, well, what does it take to do a conference and what does it take to do a workshop? Of course, people have told me all the prep you have to do and how you have to be a very prestigious person. There's all these myths out there about what is required to do these kinds of activities. So it really felt like, gosh, and I'm also defying the conventional wisdom. And I mean, I was basically, I was ready to pee my pants. I mean, let's be honest. I was really terrified, but I did it anyway. And because of a glitch in PayPal, I didn't get the emails when people signed up. Like the first 3 people who put down the deposit, I got the first 3. And I was like, okay, 3 people. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But I didn't get any more emails, and I was totally devastated. I thought, oh, I have utterly failed, and I'm really embarrassed, and people are going to, I'm going to have to go do a follow-up survey to find out what it is that I did wrong, and it took me a while to recover from that, and I only happened to be setting up the next iteration when I checked my PayPal account, discovered that we had sold out the whole workshop. Unbeknownst to me. So I wanted to at least tell you one success story of, that whole exercise took me probably 2 hours of actual work and probably 50 hours of anguish and like mentally talking to myself about what I actually needed to do. I spent way more time thinking about whether I should do the minimum viable product than actually doing it. And that's another just kind of tactical thing I want to share. A lot of minimum viable products are easier to do than to argue about. So just think about, as you're doing them, if you can overcome your fear, you can actually get this learning a lot more easily. And I just decided I don't want to talk about this 4th example. It's no good. So kind of just make sure everyone's seen this too. This is the schematic diagram of product development in a Lean Startup. Here we have customer development and agile development kind of put together in a whole company-wide feedback loop. People vaguely familiar with that concept? I put it up here because I want to remind you that it's important to have a separate problem team and solution team. Like there is no VP of minimum viable product, and it's not possible to do this kind of activity if startups are organized around functional departments. So there's got to be a set of people in the company who are just every day working on making whatever your current product is better. That's what we used to call engineering, ops, and QA, right? The solution team. What's the current hypothesis? And then every day, let's continue to make that current version better. So those are the people who are trying to prove that the current hypothesis is correct. Minimum viable product is one of the key techniques that should be used by the problem team. That is the people in the company who are trying every day to prove that the current hypothesis about what customers we're serving and what our product is wrong. You got to have somebody who every day is trying to figure out, what are we doing wrong? What could a different hypothesis that might be more effective be? And that's Rich's example was just amazing, right? If all you do is solution team activities, you can convince yourself for months on end to keep on adding features, and just around that one next feature, it's going to be success.
Especially when that's what you're good at.
What's that?
I said especially when
that's what you're good at. That's what you're used to getting positive feedback for. That's what makes you get up in the morning and be like, I'm going to write code today. That's why I got into this business in the first place. And that's why I wanted to start at the top with, why do we build products? Not so that we can feel good about our ability to build products. That's too self-referential. We got to have some external reality that we're going back to on a regular basis. That's what I want the problem team in startups to be doing. There's a bunch of techniques. I'm just going to mention a couple. These have all, I've put these up on the blog at various times. I talked about the smoke testing. This is what they call in direct marketing, when you create a marketing campaign for a product that doesn't exist yet. I've written about search engine marketing on $5 a day, where every day we spend 5 cents a click, on 100 people, and bring 100 people a day to our website. And then that really focuses your mind on, all right, every day, what do I have to do to convert more of those 100 people into customers? So very simple. Am I improving that percentage every day or not? In product split testing, people are interested in talking about kind of the mechanics of how to do split testing. That's something I've obviously written about a lot. Paper prototypes, for those from the design community. If you've never done a paper prototype, it's very minimum viable product. So you actually just create Photoshop mock-ups of what the product would look like, and get an actual customer in your office and walk them through what's going to happen. And just pay attention. Are their eyes glazing over? They're like, what the hell is this? Or are they saying something like, when can I buy this product? For God's sake, don't let me leave without it. If you've never had that response from a customer, you can kind of not realize that that's possible. But when you're telling an early adopter, a true early evangelist, about a new product that's going to solve a serious pain point for them, that's the reaction. That was my experience with the workshops, for example. Customer discovery and validation. Everyone knows The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank, the book about customer development. The first 2 phases are really all about creating possibilities for a minimum viable product. And then I'll add this last one, which is removing features. I've heard everyone be like, I can't believe they shipped the iPhone without copy and paste. How could it not have copy and paste? That's the most essential feature ever. And everyone who uses the iPhone first generation, back before it had copy and paste, was like, it's so annoying that it doesn't have copy and paste. But I love that one, because by shipping the product without it, they were able to be perfectly successful. And there's a zillion features like that even though they seem like they're really necessary, and they knew that they would be embarrassed not to have, really would have just gotten in the way of them getting the feedback sooner. And last thing, I just want to talk about 3 fears that prevent us from doing minimum viable product. Because this actually, doing it is easy. The mechanics of building these products is actually very easy. It's a psychological problem. It's a mental defect that we all have that causes us to build maximum product instead of minimum product. So I just want to talk about 3. The first is the fear of the false negative. I think this is actually by far the most difficult one. You don't really want feedback, let's be honest. Okay, I don't really want feedback. I have to remind myself whenever I give one of these talks to tell people, make sure you give me feedback, because at the end of the day, I don't really want it. I want everyone to just think that I'm awesome. And as long as I don't hear anything one way or the other, it's easy to convince myself that you all think that. Right? So if I didn't ask for feedback, it's not a problem if nobody gave me any. But what if I ask and I get a mixed bag? I know some of you saw I did a survey recently using the Kissmetrics Survey.io tool, which is another great MVP tool. I did a survey of my Twitter followers to be like, why are you following me, and what it is that you want? And I got something like 150 responses all over the map of positive, negative. I only remember one response. It was one anonymous troll who said something like, you are a shameless self-promoter of no content, or something like that. And there's something about internet trolls that they can really hit you in that moment of vulnerability about the one thing that you're really worried about, because of course I really stress about, with this whole lean startup thing, is it substantive? Is it actually helping people, or is it just entertainment? I don't mind entertaining you, but that's really not, what gets me out of bed in the morning. And so that's all I remember. I can't remember anything else that anybody else said. There was all kinds of there was a whole range of feedback, but of course our minds latch onto the stuff that reinforces our fears. And so you got to have an explicit agreement before you do a minimum viable product that you're not going to go crazy with the feedback that you get. If people say it's the worst idea ever and you're a complete idiot, that doesn't actually mean that it's a bad idea. The worst outcome for a minimum viable product is like what we had at InView. Nobody cares. If you can get people to actually yell at you and tell you you're a complete fool, that's actually a very good response. It means you've hit on a nerve, you've touched on something that they care about. And conversely, you can't be super psyched because they say, oh, I just want features X, Y, Z. That doesn't, of course, mean necessarily that you should just build every feature that people suggest, because we all know that can drive us crazy. What I call the visionary complex, customers don't know what they want, so what's the point of asking them? And I think we've covered this, but remember, our goal in a minimum viable product is not to ask customers what they think they want. That's just doing a focus group, and you can get customers to say that they want basically anything. What we want to do is test whether they actually want the thing that we're building the minimum viable product around. And then the third one, this is my personal favorite, too busy to learn. So occasionally I get the response from people, I'd love to do minimum viable product, but I'm too busy building my real product. And so it will take longer. If I do this in a series of pivots, I'll waste a lot of time collecting all this data and doing all this learning. And so, instead, I'll just do my tunnel vision and keep building my product. Another version of this is, how to say it? It's like sometimes people ask me at InView, how could you afford to do all that lean startup stuff? You must have had a lot of funding. And I actually just want to really recognize that fear, that somehow it's more expensive to spend time collecting feedback. It's more expensive to build a good deployment system. It's more expensive to invest in collecting data. Because if you only look at it from the point of view of product development itself, that is, how fast are we able to build products? That's true. A lot of this stuff is more expensive. There's a lot of overhead associated with doing an MVP. But the point is to get us through that full feedback loop of build, measure, learn, so that we get to the learning faster. So from that point of view, since the biggest form of waste in startups is building something that nobody wants, it can be a huge time savings, but it really requires you to take that global view. So anyway, that's minimum viable product. That's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you. I assume you know all this information, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them, and otherwise, I hope we'll have some discussion.
Any questions?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm hearing from your presentation is that you're thinking about minimum viable product as a physical product, or something that can be sold on a website, something that people are going to be going to on a website.
Yeah.
What about services as a product? How does that change the what you're trying to present, how you market it, how you bring it into this concept?
Give me an example of what you mean.
Massage therapy, medical services, other sorts of things. With the economic problems, with changes in healthcare,
Yeah.
there are going to be people trying to figure out, how can I bring my services to clients? How can I get them to come to me in a way that they can afford? I still make money.
Yeah. Well, so there's two answers to that question. The first is, before anyone can experience a service, they have to find out about it and make a decision to engage with that service. And so I would say the first minimum viable product to test is that. How are you going to reach customers? What are you going to have to tell them to get them to be interested? A lot of issues with startups have to do with positioning and what kind of market type you're in, to use Steve Blank's parlance. Are you in a new market? When you are, you're building something radically new that no one's ever heard of before, in which case you don't even have language to describe it to them, versus are you in an existing market where you have language to describe, but people believe that the incumbents are perfectly good, or a resegmented market, which is a hybrid of the two. So you can work through all those issues just in the marketing of the product.
Will you explain it with your pre-O'Reilly, your talk, you built a landing page? I mean, so that would be because that's a service.
Yeah,
you're providing
that's
a
right.
service here. You're not, selling us an ad.
Yeah,
So,
and in fact,
so it was what you had said earlier. I say stands for if you're an attorney or if you want to sell your services for massage therapy.
Yeah, that's true. And the second part of the answer is you got to find a way to deliver a version of the product cheaply and quickly. So think about how could we deliver a version of this product that's not as good as the final thing, but allows us to learn faster and collect data faster. And for, I've seen people who build like test kitchens for a restaurant, actually not in a real restaurant space, in order to find out, what, like, to really test out their ideas about what kind of food people like. I've seen people create, I knew a startup that was a fitness company that was trying to figure out a new way of delivering kind of a gym experience, and they took over an office park where they had like built a physical gym out, and they had a set of early customers who subscribed to a special personal trainer program. And it was a little odd for those customers. They had to drive to this office park instead of a normal retail space, but that allowed them to do the experimentation that they needed. Does that answer your question?
Getting there, it's still a little bit foggy to me, because massage therapy, for an example, is
Yeah.
pretty minimal. You need the therapist and you need the client.
Yeah.
Anything else is kind of extraneous. The question is how to get in touch with that client. So from what you're talking about, part of the product is whether it's going to be a web page, flyers, whatever, it's how are you going to get the eyes of the customer. The product is not necessarily the massage therapy.
That's right. Yeah, the product, like the thing about minimum viable product, it's not the product that's important, it's the learning that's important. So I talked about that validated learning about customers' feedback loop, that's kind of the unit of progress for a startup. The question is, what do we have to do to get validated learning? It is learning about customers, which is backed up by some actual empirical data. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was called the visionary something problem.
Yeah.
One of the problems you touched on. I mean, a lot of social web products are disruptive, and if you take the last Facebook redesign, for example, I mean, when it first came out, the feedback was 90% not only negative, but they hated it. They were going to ban Facebook. I mean, how do you, how?
Yeah, that's a
how
great
is that
example.
not a fault? I mean, when do you know? When do you know, if you feel like you have domain expertise, when do you know that you know better than the market or that early feedback?
Well, there's nothing about getting negative feedback that's bad. I mean, I think that the Facebook redesign, the first couple ones they did especially, the only thing that made it not a minimum viable product is that they rolled it out with a big bang launch to everybody and hoped for the best. I mean, I think that would have been a clear case where you would want to pilot it with a subset of customers to find out what their reaction would be ahead of time. But it's not their emotional reaction that matters. So with a lot of product changes, customers hate it because they're used to something before, and they'll just be like, you ask them, do you like this new thing? I mean, especially when you're dealing with early adopters, when you make changes that make the product more accessible to the mainstream, they hate that. What matters is what's the change in customer behavior as a result of that change. So, I mean, in like something like Newsfeed, for example, had a huge outcry of customers who thought it was going to be a bad thing. But, Facebook had the data from almost day one that it was dramatically improving engagement with the product. So, the numbers don't lie in that kind of situation. And so you just have to have enough patience and perseverance to say, we're willing to take enough time to get the feedback, really look at what the data says, really look at all the sources of data and let it run over time. You can't just, when it gets hot, pull your hand off the stove.
So, how do you know that it's not just, in that case, how do you know that the problem is not just a simple design issue as opposed to a feature issue?
You don't. Minimum viable product will not answer those questions for you, but it will allow you to ask more intelligent questions. So once you have those facts, then you can start to discuss what the problem is. If customers don't behave in the way my goal for minimum viable product for all of you is that when you're making prioritization or feature decisions, you can make intelligent decisions. Now, if you make bad decisions because you have bad judgment, I can't help you. But at least I can give you facts in the room that will make it more likely that your decision will be correct. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a related topic. Can you talk about your thoughts of the difference in a minimum viable product for a company that's basically just starting, that have nothing, no customers, no one to iterate on, and how you execute those sorts of ideas when you have a little bit more of a customer base that you can experiment on? Like how do you start basically?
Yeah. So I actually think that companies with I would say a pathetically small number of customers, that's a huge advantage. The awesome thing about having a pathetically small number of customers is you can get to know them really well. I mean, most of the techniques that big companies use to do customer research, surveys, and in-depth analysis and data mining and all that, they do because they have too many customers to keep track of, and therefore they have to do that stuff to try and make sense of all the information they have. When you're just starting out, you have the advantage of really only having a small number of people that you need to talk to. And the cool thing about having an established company, especially when you're taking a big risk like we're talking with Facebook, you can recreate those experience, that context by creating an MVP that only a subset of your customers are exposed to, so that you can get back into that mentality, which is, I really want to understand how people respond to it. That's why I think in-person interviews for MVPs generally better over surveys, better over data mining. Split testing is kind of also as good. So I would say split testing and in-person or on-the-phone interviews, because we have so much brain power dedicated to basically mind reading. So you can read my body language and my tone of voice and really get a sense for not just what am I saying, but what am I thinking. That's what we want to know when we look at the data for an MVP. Is that up?
Yeah.
Way in the back. Our host.
Yes. So, I was thinking about when we launched Slideshare.
Yeah.
So, it would have been very difficult for us to get learning from just the initial version. We launched a pretty early version, we just built it and put it out there. Because the benefits, in the beginning, everybody laughed at us because they said, PowerPoint online, it's not, what do people do there? But after a few months, when there was enough content, then when you came to the site, then the experience was extremely different. So we had to build up this repository for people to really get what it was.
But how did you get those people to upload content in the beginning?
So we had two, we had two plays. The first play was really about those people who wanted to put the presentations on their blogs. So for the second effect, the larger effect to happen, we needed the first effect to happen. And so we could get people in through that, and a little while later we had the second real effect happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. So a lot of companies have this kind of chicken and egg strategy issue. Infu had it with our customers and our third-party developers. Customers wanted content. Content developers only want to sell where there's customers already. So there's often these situations where you say, well, actually, for my company to be successful, I got to get like 10 different things to happen in sequence. MVP doesn't just make that problem go away. What we say, and exactly what we did with Slideshare, is perfect. If you understand that that's the sequence that's going to happen, then all right, what features do we absolutely need to get bloggers to start to upload presentations to Slideshare? We know we're not going to get the people that want to kind of browse around and looking for validation. Those people don't have a severe enough problem to be our early adopters. My guess is if you went back and looked at that very first version for bloggers, I bet you there's at least one feature that none of them ever used, that was designed for the mainstream audience that you didn't like. You could have lived without. You could have shipped sooner if you knew then what you knew now. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm just imagining.
We shipped very early.
Oh, so
it was barely there, kind of. In fact, going back, I would say we should have waited a little while more. Had a few. We even had an invite system, which really retarded our growth in the beginning because we wouldn't let people in unless they invite. We sent them invitations.
Yeah. So yeah, that doesn't sound good. Right. So that's exactly right. We want to have, this is an art, not a science. So it's not like I can sit here and say for any given product, there is some calculatable optimal set. All I can say is most entrepreneurs, your instincts for what's the minimum viable product are like 10 times off. So, maybe you're one of those rare entrepreneurs that has that kind of gut instinct for creating an MVP, but just in case, just check out whether it's possible that you could accomplish your strategy and learn something interesting with half the features. And then if you want to be really bold, maybe try with half again and just imagine what would that look like for customers? Would they laugh at me? That's great. Showing a product to customers where they laugh and say, I can't believe you were dumb enough to ship this without feature X is a great outcome, because now you know that feature X is pretty important. And as soon as you get that data, you'll immediately rationalize that feature X was always at the top of your priority list to begin with. So you got to make sure you write this stuff down ahead of time so that you can notice when you're wrong. Otherwise, human brain is very good at after-the-fact rationalization. Let's do one more question, yeah.
What sort of traits or characteristics do you look out for in early adopters? For example, sometimes Mint was characterized with, here are traits that people use Mint, but they're all technologists, so et cetera, et cetera. So what sort of early adopter traits do you look out for to not have it sort of swing your data that you get from feedback?
Well, it's a really hard thing. It's a fact of life with the technology lifecycle adoption curve that every successful product has to embrace and then reject its early adopters. It's like a tragic Greek play. You know, it's not. This isn't going to end well, but it's what we have to go through. It's a side effect of the dynamics of technology adoption. So the key thing is, first of all, in the beginning, if techie type people are the only people that will use your product, then embrace that. Like, congratulations that anybody would use your product. Like, that's great news, and you can learn a lot from those people. You just have to keep in mind what your longer term vision is. And if your long-term vision is to build a mainstream product, then you have to be constantly alert for, is the feedback I'm getting from these customers like skewing me too much towards what they want, or is it going to prevent me from going to mainstream customers? And the easiest way to check that out is to be regularly exposing your MVP to mainstream customers, and have them tell you, like, for example, if you have an early adopter community, your early adopters should say it's the easiest to use product they've ever used, and your mainstream customers should be like, this is so hard to use, I don't even know where to start. Like, that's a good sign that you're meeting the needs of your early adopters, but you're going to need to get much more usable for the mainstream market. And then you got to ask yourself, does the problem that these early adopters have, are there other people out in the world who have a similar problem but slightly less severe? Right? So, or who are blocked from using this product by their abilities. That's a classic thing when you have really technologically savvy early adopters. Like, there's plenty of people who would like to use Linux because they don't want to pay for their operating system but lack the technical sophistication. If someone can build a version of Linux that they can use, then, it'd be a huge startup and you could take Linux out of the early adopter community. It's just, so far no one's been able to actually do that. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
So, Rich, what do you want to do?
Well, thanks, Eric.
Oh, thank you.